Yes, hello. Hi, Kyle and Eddie. We are waiting for Eva to join us. She might be lost in translation between clinicians and tech teams. We're very confident that she will be joining us in a second. Because we don't like awkward silences while the audience is joining us, we always prepare an icebreaker question. And it's the following. So we're 12 months from now, so put your mind into the future. ChatGPT has solved all problems in healthcare, luckily, but unfortunately, we're out of a job because all of these problems have been solved. What will you be spending your time on? Eddie, maybe will you go first, please? And tell us why. Give us some context on why you would make that choice.
These are some interesting choices. I'll actually go with barista at the local coffee shop. Probably an unexpected choice because I've actually always had the dream of opening a bubble tea shop. So that's the closest that I could find on the slide to that.
Great. I love bubble tea. Nice. Kyle, please enlighten us.
I think I'd probably go with author, but even though I've got the facial and the hair length for the barista look that you've got going here, I think I would still have to go with author. I'm working on a book, so I think the writing part is easy. It's published author that might be the difficult part, but yeah, that's what I would lean into, is author.
Interesting. It's out of scope for this webinar, Kyle, but you'll have to talk to us about that sometime. And maybe there's a publisher in the audience, who knows?
Yeah, if anybody's got a friend in publishing or agencies, I'll talk to them.
Very good. So happy to see Eva joining us. You're not too late, Eva, but I'm going to throw you under the bus immediately. So you're seeing the question on the screen. It's 12 months from now. You lost your job because luckily ChatGPT solved all problems in healthcare. What will you spend your time on and why?
Oh, good question. So I think I have some insurance in this ChatGPT scenario because I'm a provider. And so I'll probably still be delivering babies. I don't think ChatGPT is going to take that away from me. But I think I resonate with whoever was talking about bubble tea. Like I'm a huge baker, and can't say I'm a good baker, but I do enjoy baking. And so it'd be fun to own a bakery or like a cafe. But like I said, I think I've got some insurance in this world.
Great. Rick, what about you?
Yeah, I'm not very original, but while I don't have the looks, I definitely not have the hair, but I also really want to become a barista one day. So I also gonna choose for that one. Maybe we can open one big barista shop together. That might be, and a bubble tea, like that would be a perfect fit.
Well, I didn't think that was going to be the popular choice.
No, me neither. Me neither. Interesting. So, you know what? We can sell books at this local coffee shop because I would go for the author as well. Also working on a book. You know, the bad news is that none of these brains will be working on climate tech, unfortunately, in the next 12 months. But anyway, let's keep moving here. Thank you for enlightening us, Rick. I'll give you the floor.
Yeah. So thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Eva. Thank you, Kyle, for making time. And thank you for the more than 400 people that signed up. I think CareOps is now a community of more than 3,000 people, and we are still growing. The session will be recorded, and we also send it to everyone who signed up. And we will also do a Q&A at the end, so feel free to already post your questions as they come, because we have Thomas, the co-author of CareOps, who is monitoring the chat. And talking about the chat, feel free to continue using it to put your thoughts and questions in it. And maybe Thomas, before I'll ask Eddie, Eva, and Kyle to introduce themselves, maybe you can quickly remind everyone why we are here today.
Yeah, sure. So I'll keep this relatively short. The reason is obviously CareOps, and for some people in the audience, this will start to sound really familiar. But CareOps, it's not a business or a for-profit. It's more of kind of a movement. We are bringing together people from clinical and clinical operations, product engineering, compliance, around building and operating and continuously improving care flows, with the goal of driving outcomes improvements for patients and efficiency in care delivery improvements as well. But what is a care flow? A care flow can have many different forms, sizes, and shapes, from the patient intake to the chronic care management for chronic disease. There are so many workflows all across the care continuum, and you can actually all call them care flows. Now, the problem is that building and implementing and improving these flows is broken. Many, if not all, care providers follow very similar processes to do that. They take a lot of inputs from evidence-based guidelines to data that needs to be captured somewhere in that flow, to just looking at how we've always been doing things, and then spending a lot of time mapping out their ideal flows in tools, throwing that over the wall to engineers who then spend a lot of time integrating point solutions and writing code to embed those flows into their tech stacks. But there are some problems with that. Very often the right input is not always taken into account from the beginning. This means some flows have to keep on living as digital documents forever. And very often the feedback loop is not closed. And this feedback loop is crucial because if we don't evolve these care flows, we might get a sustainable competitive disadvantage over our competitors who are evolving their care flows and so driving better outcomes and lower cost of care continuously. Now, the reason why we are here today is because sometimes this care flow life cycle is broken because of communication and siloed teams. And we have one of the best memers in the space with us. Rick prepared this one especially for this evening. So our topic of today is how we can help engineers and clinicians work together more closely. I'll hand it back over to you, Rick.
Yeah, maybe before I take over, can you quickly introduce yourself, Thomas, and then I can take over.
Sure. So I'm Thomas, co-founder and CEO of AWell. AWell is on a mission to make care flows work harder than care teams. We do that through our no-code platform that is used by care teams to design their flows and implement them into their existing tech stacks. I'm also co-author together with Rick at CareOps.
Yeah, and before I ask you to introduce yourself, so I'm Rick. I lead partnerships at AWell, and I'm also the co-author of AWell. Now, I would also like to each panelist to briefly introduce themselves and the organization that they work with. So maybe Eddie, you can kick things off.
Sure. Hi, my name is Eddie Kay. I'm a director of engineering at Devoted Health. I primarily support the Devoted medical team. So we have a team of clinicians offering both in-home and virtual care, mainly for our members that have chronic illness, but also to make sure they have what they need, like post-discharge.
All right, Eva, maybe can you introduce yourself as well?
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here. So thank you so much to Rick and Thomas for the introduction and invitation. My name is Eva. I am a OBGYN and the director of care innovation here at Cityblock, where we are focused on building care delivery solutions for the Medicaid population.
All right, and last but not least, Kyle.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kyle Munkittrick. I'm a group product manager at One Medical. I've been here for over a decade. First half was in operations. Second half, I support our workflow product team. So that is the team that does care flows. So similar to Eva, the slide really resonated. Yeah, excited to be here.
All right. So before we talk solutions, let's first focus on the problem. So maybe Kyle, to start with you, can you elaborate on why you think the friction between the care team and the technology team exists today in healthcare?
Ooh, I mean, the simplest version is we think we could do each other's jobs. Like I mean, most of what I run into is, the product team is watching a clinician like, that's way too complicated. You can simplify that. And then you start watching and shadowing, you're like, never mind, it's more complicated than I imagined. And the same as the reverse are, why can't you just add a button is often the ask we get all the time. And, the code underneath that button is 2 months of work. So I think a lot of it comes from what I've seen most is underestimating how complicated the other person's job often is. And so that's the first place that I've seen it occur, but I'm sure there's a lot more to it than that, but I'll start there.
Maybe Eva, when I talked with you 2 or 3 weeks ago, you mentioned something about the 2 tensions. So one was training and one was responsibility. Can you maybe elaborate a bit more on this and then to explain obviously why this tension exists? I think you explained very well when we talked.
Yeah, no, so first of all, agree with Kyle 100%. I think and that speaks a little bit to the training. So again, my bias is that I am a clinician, and that is my training lens. And, that's high school, 4 years of college, 4 years of medical school, and however long residency training it took you to ultimately see patients autonomously. And through that training process as clinicians, you learn to be very measured when you have to take risk, because risk means a patient's life. Risk means a patient's health. And so you're not going to just prescribe a med because you think it feels good or you think that's the right thing based on some gut feeling. All of your decisions have to be backed up with tons and tons and tons of evidence. In the clinical world, it is constantly quoted that it takes 17 years from something that was discovered at the bench or in the lab to actually become implemented at the bedside. So you can imagine the degrees of evidence and vetting that has to go through before you can actually say oh, that's the right medication that you need to take today. And so inherently, I think clinicians are risk averse and rely on lots and lots of evidence. So that's one training lens. Can't speak to the product or engineering side. My closest thing to that is my dad's a software engineer. And I think that code is really complex. I tried. It is definitely, he is very sad I did not go into engineering and coding. And he keeps asking if that's another degree that I want to get. But it's really hard. It does feel like I'm looking at just a jumble of text, and I just don't understand how they all fit together. And I think it's a very specific mindset, and certainly appreciate that problem solving that goes into that. And so that's a whole nother level of complexity and training. But I think that tension, Rick, we were talking about has to do with on the clinical side, like I said, you can't really fail, and you don't intend to fail when you do things. But as we're working together, particularly as we're trying to create something new and something better, the old age saying is that you need to fail often and fail fast. But how do you fail often and fail fast when you're in healthcare, when you're trying to deliver the best outcome to that member or patient? And so I think that is also a very inherent tension where, as a clinician, I want the whole end-to-end workflow to be built before I can be ready to go. But how do you iteratively test? And that takes, I think, a lot of partnership between the two groups to do that really well.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And Eddie, maybe, so you worked at the Tina and then you jumped to Toast for 3 years and now you're back again in healthcare. Why do you think that this tension exists from your perspective?
So having had, as you mentioned, a career that has spanned healthcare as well as other technology companies, I feel like there's always that tension, whether that's between different tech teams or between tech teams and users or tech teams and stakeholders. And I think, there's always some amount of, different vocabulary or different perspectives, different, skills and knowledge that everyone's bringing to the table. And it takes, actually a fair amount of hard work to be able to communicate, to be able to, get teams aligned. In our case, we're trying to get these these best health outcomes for our patients or for our members, but day to day, it can be easy to sort of lose track of that when you're just talking about this ticket or this project. But if we give our teams, enough time and space to talk to each other, to find that common ground, and to iterate on how we work and how we can help each other deliver those outcomes, then that's really what we need to do.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting points. So now that we understand the problem high level, can we maybe zoom in a little bit more on the reason why it's important to make sure that you bridge the gap as a care organization between these two teams? So maybe do you have any practical example, Eva, where your organization was able to thrive because you were able to bring these roles together, or even better, a story where something failed because there was no harmony between the two?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to answer that question. And it really, I think I had no idea how large CareOps was, and it was only till I got some pings from internally that there are probably tons of Cityblockers out in the audience today. And so a big shout out to everyone. I think our primary focus this year is really trying to re-examine most of our key services and actually revamp them towards the goal of standardization and ultimately data visibility, so that we know how well we're doing and know how to make improvements. And we are working ridiculously fast to implement all of these different changes. And if anyone on our transitions of care team is on the call, like huge kudos to you. The only way we were able to move so quickly with so much detail is because we worked cross-functionally. Cityblock is in some ways interestingly siloed as a startup organization, where we have my team, which our care innovation team are really like our clinical product team. We define the vision, the clinical vision of where we want to go. But we can't do that alone. And this is why very close cross-functional work is necessary to be successful. Our partners in crime are our ops design team, who I simplify is by saying they're our process experts. They can take that clinical vision and break it down to all of the happy and unhappy paths a member can take, and also tying in like which different types of systems get employed in order to do that process the best. And then, of course, we have our product team that is really at the all the way upstream in terms of here's the problem that we're trying to solve. And they're brainstorming with us on what that solution is and what the ultimate process is. And without that close collaboration, none of that would be possible. And we would totally fall flat on our face. The example I use of why we need to work this way is actually not a Cityblock example, but it's more of a traditional legacy organization. One of the things that I was trying to implement back in my past life as an academic clinician was a postpartum phone call. It is best practice to have some sort of contact with a patient who has just delivered their baby within the first 3 weeks after delivery. It's to hopefully catch anything that might be going in the wrong direction early. And it's also, good human care. Someone just went through a pretty big deal in their lives, and it's good to check in. Something as simple, and no one disagreed with me that this was the right thing to do. Clinical best practice actually recommends it. It was near impossible to get done because I didn't have a team of process experts. I didn't have a team thinking about how this would be enabled from a product and engineering and platform perspective. And so guess what? Something that was actually recommended clinical best practice didn't get implemented. We don't do it today, still to this day at the institution that I work for. And that is a huge loss to patients. And so I really think that it's important for all three of those perspectives to work very, very closely together in order to actually do something new and better.
Yeah, I love that example. Maybe Kyle or Eddie, given your experience, do you have an example where your organization was really able to thrive because you're able to bridge the gap between all these roles and bring these together?
Yeah, I've got a couple examples. It's funny that Therese put a question in the chat too. I think one thing that's been really nice about One Medical is, one, all of our clinicians, regardless of their position in leadership, are either panel building or patient facing in terms of delivering care. So we've got virtual clinicians who are both our clinical tech advisors. So we have a special team of about 5 to 6 clinicians. They're all practicing either panel building or on our virtual team. So they see patients every week, and they regularly meet with product managers and engineering to help design solutions. They're also some of our first alpha testers. So in terms of like practical solutions, we found a set of clinicians who are, Eva, you're mentioning that clinicians are risk averse. In general, yes, but not all of them. A few of them are a little bit more comfortable with things being fast and loose. And we found those folks are really good at helping us try things, especially early on. And so I think one thing to recommend is find the people who are maybe more risk tolerant or are comfortable, I don't know, improving during a visit if the technology doesn't quite do what they want it to. So that's been really helpful. And I think the other thing is the constant exposure with that team has also let them understand how product managers and engineers think. So they've moved away from the, hey, can I get a button that does X? And instead they're more likely to say, it's actually kind of nice because all they have to do is complain. They're just like, I just hate it so much when I have to do this little irritating thing. And that lets our product team think about cool, exciting solutions there. And then I actually want to build on Teresa's point about people who have healthcare experience on the tech side of the house. My background is in bioethics. And then I was on the operations side for half of my career before moving into product. And I think we've done our best at One Medical to try to find people who've experience on multiple sides of that organization, or basically all 3 sides of this particular stool that we're talking about. So anywhere you can find somebody who's like, yeah, I was a nurse and then I decided to join operations, or yeah, I'm a clinician who sees patients every day, but I'm teaching myself the code in the background. Those are some of the folks we found have the most comfort with these conversations and can help be bridges for their peers who are maybe less experienced with those different parts. So those are some of my experiences.
So if I can come back to something that Eva said, so I love how it's called Ops Design Team. What you use at Cityblock, okay, so that's great. So this is the team of process experts, right? They take the clinical vision and then break that down into those happy and unhappy paths. That's really interesting. And then you have another team who is thinking about how to enable all of that into existing applications. That's then your product and engineering team, I assume. Okay, so let's say I'm a small care provider just starting out, great ambitions, but I don't have this ops design team, right? Coming back to the last point, and also Teresa's point, is this someone that ideally comes from healthcare or ideally comes from product, from tech?
That's a good question. I think some sort of healthcare background is helpful, but to me, if I were, recruiting for an ops designer, I'd be really looking for someone who is very comfortable with complexity, is curious, and creative, because I think to create a break, like to be comfortable with creating processes and breaking them, you have to be able to appreciate the complexity of all the things that are happening just to make a button work, or to dispense a medication. And you have to ask the questions of like, all right, you do it this way, but do you have to do it this way? What are other ways that you could do this? What happens if you don't do this? And I think it's that frame of mind that is more important than anything else. I'm curious what Kyle and Eddie think here.
Yeah, I totally agree. In my experience, I've worked with RNs who are, very savvy on, on like, let's say, using an EHR, right? And think about like how they can change those workflows and stuff. I've also worked with, like UX folks or product folks who are like very sort of ops minded and have sat with lots of clinicians, understand how the software is used and can think about the flow of work, from one team to another, or care flow as patient journeys go and stuff. So I think like it's by nature just a very multidisciplinary like role to take on, and you don't like really need one particular degree or kind of background, as long as as Eva said, you're curious and you can ask good questions.
So maybe last point here, or Kyle, go ahead. You were going to say something. Go
Oh
ahead.
yeah, just one quick thing I was going to add is, I think to Eddie's point, like having that diversity of experience is important. I think also somebody's maybe not afraid of people with alphabet soup after their name. There's a lot of like clinicians carry a lot of weight, and like, oh, the director of engineering says this, or our VP of care delivery says this, and as somebody in these operational positions, you have to be able to push back and be like, is this the best way to do it? Are we sure about that? So I think it's also somebody who's maybe not afraid of conflict. It seems like it's been a very beneficial part of that process. So it's an underrated benefit of that, or a requirement for that role.
So it's exactly the question I was going to ask. So what are you doing at each of your organizations to because it's a culture thing, right? Are you selecting this person in the application process to be actually conflict prone, or do you actually encourage them to challenge openly? And then on the other side, do you tell clinicians not to be offended when they are challenged on their decades of training and autonomy as a clinician? What do you do practically to encourage this behavior?
That's a really good question. I think part of it is, it depends on the culture of the company. So in general, One Medical has tried to be fairly flat and sort of be like, anyone can get feedback from anyone. We sort of use the lean methodology around a lot of things. So a lot of it is staying humble. I think both Eddie and Eva mentioned shadowing. So going and sitting and watching that person do it, and we do it in both directions. So we'll have our engineers and our product people sit and watch our clinicians deliver care. And, it's stunning and humbling watching even, just a standard physical that's going well. And you're still like, this is incredible. I couldn't manage the first 10 minutes of this. But what we do in the reverse is we have our clinicians sit in and watch our engineering teams try and design and solve the problems, and listening to them say like, okay, well, here are the 20 edge cases we have to solve for, or walking them through, well, what happens if the answer is 0, or what happens if nobody does this, or what, all those things they have to think through. And suddenly the clinician's like, oh, I see, I don't have to do this. So to answer your question, Thomas, it's not in the hiring description. And often most of the roles we use that are collaborative internally, like our clinical tech advisors, are identified once they're in the role. So they're clinicians who are delivering everyday care. They've expressed an interest in technology, and then we actually have an interview process to see if they make it into it. And it's just a variety of checks like that. So, yeah.
I mean, one simple thing that we do is no one refers to me as Dr. Luo at Cityblock. I think we try, at least even from a naming perspective, to stay fairly flat. I think all of our clinicians are referred to on a first name basis. And so that takes a little bit of that pressure away. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, Kyle, because I do oftentimes worry about the sometimes unfair weight that clinicians do carry in a room, because we do have expertise, but when it comes to, I think, designing the optimal workflow, our expertise is limited. It is a clinical perspective, and that's just one part of the puzzle. So it could just be don't refer to your doctors as doctors, and just refer to them as first name. And that actually, I think, takes a lot of the weight off of the conversation.
Maybe to double down on this shadowing piece, Kyle, because I think it's very important. How much do your clinicians or engineers shadow on a yearly basis? Is it once per year, and is it everyone in your organization, or is it only the senior ones, or how do I need to see that? And when do you think that there are other organizations that are not to scale as One Medical should start on doing shadowing?
It's funny, it was easier when we were smaller. So now that we've scaled up, it's more difficult to shadow. But we have so one, we do both virtual and in person. So if you're far off and you're not near one of our offices, but almost every engineer, everyone on the product team tries to do it at least once a quarter. And then if we're starting up a particular project, often, like, for example, we're building, it doesn't matter what it is, one of our teams does a daily huddle using a tool that we're building, and we had every member of the team watch 3 or 4 of those huddles. And we just sat and watched, no question asking, just watch how they use it, understand what their context is. And it took, I don't know, 2 hours out of 2 weeks, and it probably saved us 3 weeks worth of engineering, because a couple of the engineers caught stuff that both the designer and myself missed in terms of little nuances of how they worked. And that additional context allowed them to figure out, oh, we should actually architect things this way. So the answer is, we do a lot of shadowing on the product and design side, probably several, like multiple hours a quarter, and depending on how many projects we're launching in the research phase at time.
And maybe a question to you, Eddie, because Devoted has been able to consistently deliver amazing results. I think you announced the results last week. It was also very impressive. So besides shadowing, because you mentioned that to me a few weeks ago that you also do that, what is another practice or ritual that Devoted has adopted to help bridge the gap between the care team and the technology team that you think is very effective?
Yeah, so first I'll touch upon the culture aspect that you all mentioned a little bit ago. I think that's super important. Like we, like throughout the company, you know, from starting from like the recruiting process when we're talking to, you know, people who are thinking about working at Devoted, right? We look for people who are who really have a growth mindset, right? Who will be trying to think, you know, how could I have done that better? Or, you know, how can we as a team work better in the future, right? And that's like across the entire company. So, you know, we don't, you know, schedule clinicians like, you know, 100% on like, you know, 9 to 5, like five days a week. There's some slack time there so that they can, you know, work with their medical directors to talk about how things are going, and largely the medical directors then talk to, you know, our tech teams, and you know, try to make the processes better, talk about what's working and what's not working in the workflows, or, you know, in the back end, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's important that you know, everyone, especially leadership, makes that time and space for the teams to think about how to do things better, and that you know, has, of course, local benefits just on each team, but especially in the context of, you know, the conversation we're having between the tech teams and the clinician teams, it allows them to really think about how things can be different and can be better. Yeah, so like more specifically, you know, I definitely agree with the shadowing piece. I think like like any time spent shadowing, I feel like, you know, all of our like my entire team, you know, the engineers, the UX people, the product managers, I think everyone always gets a ton of value out of you know, actually seeing what people are doing with you know, with our product. I think the time that I've spent shadowing clinicians, you know, from since like 15 years ago, you know, I still remember like you know, all of those sessions and how valuable they have been for me personally. Yeah.
The concept of giving enough mental space to clinicians to do other things than just providing care is a really important one. And Kyle, if I remember correctly, at One Medical, you had something called the clinical technology ambassadors that are related to this. Can you maybe explain to the audience what is this and how this is used within your organization?
Yeah, so we actually have two groups. So one is the clinical tech advisors, and that's a small, I don't know, elite is the wrong word, but they've had a lot of practice working with the tech team. So, and that's a dedicated role for them. So it's like part of their job description, and that's what they do. And so that's like, I don't know, the final form if you're going with the Pokemon evolution of clinical tech product teammates. But we also have a group called the One Life Ambassadors. One Life is our internal EMR. And what that team really does is they're designed to be both sides of the coin. So these are clinicians who are really interested in technology, and they've provided really good feedback in the past. And it's not a ton of time, it's like 1 hour a month where they meet, but they have a Slack channel where they have direct access to the product team, and they're able to chat back and forth and ask questions. But the cool part is they're also given the responsibility of representing the technology to their team. So if the team has a question, often those ambassadors will ask us on behalf of the entire team. So let's say for our office clinicians, something strange is going on with their daily schedule. One of the ambassadors will often ask a question, be like, hey, is this on purpose? What's going on here? And then we can respond. So the entire tech org is in that channel as well. And so it's nice because we can also use that place. We drop designs in. So if one of our designers or researchers is trying to figure something out, we'll drop them in. Or if there's a problem that everyone has been seeing but doesn't really know how to describe, we've had our clinical teams drop GIFs or screen shares of like something going on in the UI, and suddenly the whole team can see it. There's no need to shadow. And because we know this ambassador knows exactly what's going on, it's a lot easier for us to get guidance because they're more experienced, explaining what the problem is. So I think one of the things that's helped us a lot is having different levels from very, very like experienced and practiced to, I don't know, getting your feet wet, collaborating with product.
And maybe 2 follow-up questions, like how many clinicians within One Medical from a percentage perspective are these ambassadors? Maybe question 1.
It's about 5%, maybe. It's like less 50 something right now.
Okay, interesting. And do you have an idea, ballpark, how much time they spent on providing care and how much time they spent on being an evangelist and giving all this feedback?
Yeah, so as ambassadors, there's no substantial reduction in care time. So these are mostly full-time clinicians who are seeing patients all the time. And, somebody doesn't show up for their 2 p.m. appointment and they're popping in, or if they're on our virtual team, because that's kind of inbounds, they're just not taking the next call and instead reaching out to us with a question. And we've got everyone from super veterans who've been with the company longer than I have, and then folks who it's their first 6 months and they're like, I'm really excited about this. I did this at my previous spot. I'd love to join in and help. The other cool thing is our more senior ambassadors help onboard the newer ones. So if you're brand new to the experience, you're not expected to jump in at the same level. So it's a kind of choose your own adventure thing. So some people do it, they don't love it, or they only do it a little bit every month, whereas other people, it feels like they're putting something in the channel every day.
Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe, Eva, while it's not completely aligned with what you do, I think the role that you have is the same like goal to achieve. So can you maybe explain to the audience what you and your team do on a day-to-day basis and how you're helping Cityblock to bridge the gap that we were talking about today?
Yeah, so we are we're a very unique group, and it sounds like unique across even One Medical and Devoted as being represented here, in that we were specifically hired as almost like clinical ambassadors, but dedicated clinical ambassadors. And I use that term because that seems to make a lot of sense in terms of what we do. So my team is primarily a team of clinicians, and all levels of clinicians. So not just MDs, not just RNs, but we're trying to be a diversified group in order to speak to our integrated care team that we have at Cityblock. The role that we play is both strategic in that we work with our super clinical SMEs. Like we have probably some of the most amazing behavioral health specialists who are really thinking out of the box and dreaming about how it is that we can do substance use disease better, how it is that we treat severe mental illness better, how we treat pregnancy better. So we have a cohort of those clinicians, and the job of my team is actually to say, all right, here's where you want to go. How do we develop that? Or how would we execute on that in a sustainable and scalable way? And so we play a little bit, it's like we've maybe some ops design type characteristics, but we're one step removed from the clinicians on the ground and the clinicians who are really the innovators and dreaming about clinical services. So we play that role of translation of how do we take that dream, turn it into a strategy, develop the operations for execution, and then we work together with our best friends, our ops design team and product team in order to make it a reality. And so we take both inbound and I suppose outbound signals. So from an inbound perspective, we were talking about transitions of care. So we have a process where we are monitoring how that service is going. We keep very basically like an issues log, and there are small problems that probably come up on a day-to-day basis. And those could probably be solved by just one person. Maybe one product engineer can fix that issue. Or it maybe is a very minute QI project that requires a manual change and not something like a big overhaul. But once that issues log identifies something that's a big problem that requires potentially a re-overhaul in the process, that's when the entire kind of team of innovation, ops design, and product come back together as an inbound signal. The outbound signal is my team is also responsible for thinking, all right, here's where our care model is today. Here's what we know about the population. Here are the clinical outcomes we're driving towards. What are we missing from a services perspective? Should we start doing, and I use this as a provocative example, it is not something that we are considering at Cityblock, but should we buy an apartment building and start creating a short-term housing service for our members who we know have an incredible amount of housing instability that we know affects their health? And so it's also my team's job to start evaluating ahead of the curve a little bit. What are some of those additional services that we should be developing either in-house, working with other partners to bring in-house, and do that kind of analysis again from like, here's the dream, what's the strategy, how would we execute on that? And so that's how my team kind of operates at Cityblock.
Yeah, I love that. Obviously, Cityblock has a decent scale already, and you have some money, while some organizations don't have the same amount of money. So when do you think a care team or a care providing organization should start hiring for a role, and how can they already embrace this sort of role within their organization, even if they only have 10 or maybe 20 employees? Because I think it's a really, really important role to have within the organization.
I actually really like what Kyle was describing in terms of what One Medical has put into place is really leveraging the expertise within the organization, because many of the things that you're trying to make improvements on are things that you're doing day to day. And so having that specific insight is incredible. And, you know, one other thing that sits on my mind at Cityblock is, you know, the providers don't necessarily have a very clear advancement. Like you provide care, but if you want to take on other responsibilities, if you want to stretch and grow in a new way, like what would that look like? And so I can imagine escalating from becoming a clinical ambassador, and then maybe it does take more of your time and you provide less care and it becomes a more formalized position. So I'd probably say like starting in-house, getting those insights and practice would naturally kind of fit into a role that is like what my team has.
Okay, cool. Maybe another aspect here. So a lot of clinicians who might have worked at traditional health systems first, are used to work with incumbent technology tools that are, more often than not a bit rigid, and where they ask for something, only 5% of what they ask ultimately gets delivered, and it takes 10x the time to deliver it. How do you deal it? They might come into your organizations, a bit jaded about how tech can actually help them in their jobs. How do you manage that? And then maybe a follow-up question immediately is, how do you keep promises? We all know how difficult it is to keep promises with product. So how do you, if you have the trust of the clinician, how do you keep the trust that product will deliver? Maybe Eddie, I don't know if you, from your engineering background.
Yeah, I guess I start by really listening to what those clinicians are saying, and whether it's from shadowing or from a shared Slack channel that we have too, like just really noticing what all the pain points are, and trying to address, especially like the little things, trying to reduce all those little friction pain points, because they might be actually really easy fixes, engineering wise, and as the team holistically sees that, oh, we brought up this issue and someone was listening and they addressed it, right? Or we brought up this bigger issue and someone was listening and they said, okay, that wouldn't really be a quick fix, like we'll take note of it, but we're focused on these bigger projects right now, and hopefully there's also communication that goes on there about what's being prioritized and why, and between the tech team and the clinicians, we sort of have a shared understanding of why the high priority work is the high priority work, and why that this is being worked on now versus some of the other stuff on the backlog that hasn't quite bubbled up yet, right? So that trust just takes communication and a history of delivering results.
Anything to add there, Kyle or Eva?
Yeah, I mean, I can. So in addition to so I think Eva also emphasized Eddie's point about emphasizing the why. We also will bring our clinicians into the why. So if we're making a big trade-off, often we'll work with them and say, like, all right, here are 3 things we need to build. They're each going to take 3 months. What order do we want to do these in? And sort of help them see the like it's not us communicating the prioritization. It's sort of saying, help us figure this out. Like, what actually is the most important to you? And we found that builds a lot of trust. The other thing is, different companies call them different things, just do it's, or, nice to have, whatever you want to describe it as. But often, Eddie had mentioned, when you see like a little thing that's easy to fix on the engineering side, often we'll try to grab stuff that nobody quite asked for, but we're like, oh, we could do that in like 2 days and clean that up. And then the last thing is we'll do, we get outside reactions to things you never expect, like colors or little design changes. And so also seeing what it is that the team is excited about and using those to be like, hey, we're listening, we're continuously working on this thing. Even if some of the work we're doing is under the hood and you're not going to see a change for 6 months, is making sure we're listening to, it's like the broken windows theory of product development, where you're like, oh, if this font is weird or this specific button doesn't work the way you expect it to, just keeping track of those bugs and cleaning up little bugs when we aren't able to get to the big features at the same time. So saying, hey, we're listening, we're not abandoning you, we're working on what we can with the time that we have.
Totally agree to all of the above. I think the one thing that I would also add is, I think it's really easy, and I'm totally do this all the time, is it's easy to jump to the solution. Like, I just need this. I just need this to work. I just need this product feature. I just need this new window and my life will be a million times better. And I think what we try to really, really focus on at Cityblock, especially the 3 teams working together, is defining a problem statement that we all agree best describes what it is that we are solutioning towards. Because the feature is almost like, or jumping to one, there's the problem with jumping to solutions too fast, but it's also, if you're like so fixated on the feature, like, what is it about that feature that actually is solving the problem, or what does that feature represent? And once you kind of tease that out, again, double plus on and double clicking and totally agree on all of the like listening aspect, but you'll be able to tease out what the problem is. And maybe it is actually not a button and it's the font or it's the color, or actually they had to do 3 clicks to get to somewhere and that actually wastes a lot of time. And so you might actually be able to find a much easier solution once you really understand what the problem is.
Maybe to take it somewhere else, let's go super practical. So imagine that you can now speak to all the healthcare engineers, to all the healthcare PMs, to all the clinicians in the world, and you can give them one super practical advice about bridging the gap between the tech team and the care team. What advice would you give to them so we all benefit from it in the long term? Maybe Kyle, can you start?
Yeah, I mean, I think the advice I would give to the product and the engineering team, I guess I would give it to, is like to all 3 groups, is you work in health tech, like you better know both of those words. So like if you're a technical person and you don't know what syncope is or nephrology, like learn what those words mean. You're going to hear them, you're going to see them, get comfortable seeing body parts and looking at intense images, and also the emotions that come with these things, like how complicated some of the decisions people are making and how wrapped up in them they are. Like, I think being able to understand what clinicians and what patients are going through is an easy thing to be excited about when you're applying and to disconnect from once you're in that space. And the same side on the clinical is, learn what an API is, get a sense of like different frameworks. If somebody says, oh, we're spending a lot of time on the back end or we have tech debt, those shouldn't be terrifying terms. And I found that those little things of like me knowing what syncope is can make a conversation go 10 times better, just because we aren't aliens. We're all on the same page. And then I think the last thing that's helped us a lot is Eva's point about focusing on the problem statement. And then often for us, we'll focus on the patient. So like, okay, we're all here to help the patient have a better experience and have better outcomes. How is this helping the patient out? And it can be 7 steps removed, updating your version of Node can ultimately help the patient, but knowing how you get there is the important piece. So those are the practical things that I've seen that any person can do.
Eddie, any advice you have?
Yeah, it sort of echoes a lot of Kyle's points, but if I were to try to distill it down, I would say you're all on the same team. You're all trying to make your members or your patients healthy, right? And that should be the framing for all of the work that you're doing, whether you're a clinician, whether you're an engineer, or anything in between. So tying it back to like everything we've talked about, this whole hour, that means you might be shadowing, you might be in meetings together, you might be in Slack channels together. You're actively listening and you're trying to help one another, right? So try to think of each other as teammates rather than someone on a different team.
Eva, anything to add there, given your clinical lens?
I mean, I agree with everything that has been said. And I think the one other thing I'll add is appreciate everyone's superpower. Because everyone is coming at this from a different perspective, and you need all those perspectives to really work together and come up with the best solution. And actually an exercise that I'm going to try to ask my team to do next week in order to like better define like what is our superpower and what are the superpowers of our teammates is we're going to a theme park as part of our offsite. And I'm going to be asking like, what's the Care Innovation team equivalent in designing the theme park? Like, what is it that the Care Innovation team does? Like a theme park is something everyone enjoys. Then same question, like, what does the ops design team do if they were to design this theme park? Or maybe theme park might be too broad. Let's pick like one roller coaster ride. And then same thing, like what does the product team bring to the table in designing this roller coaster ride? And you'll realize, I think through that exercise, like, sure, maybe the innovation team represents the like riders experience and the operators experience in making that roller coaster go well. And then ops design is thinking about the queuing and, you know, how we flow through the ride. And product is actually building that ride and saying, all right, we want that like 200-foot drop, not just a 100-foot drop, because that doesn't provide enough thrill or whatever it is. But you'll realize that none of us would be able to do it alone. Like if we only knew what the patient and the clinical team needed, sure, great, but you wouldn't be able to execute on any of that. And so I think appreciating everyone's superpower, and I love that, like we are all in the same team. We have to work together.
I love
Eva,
that.
you just made me realize that our icebreaker question should have had a theme park job. We would have all chosen the theme park job. I think that's such a beautiful analogy. I love it.
Yeah, indeed. Maybe we have 2 minutes left. Eva, can you tell the story about like the thing you mentioned 2 weeks ago about what makes or breaks the experience at a theme park? You shared some data about it.
Yeah, actually, so I had done a similar exercise before in a past life for consulting, and it was actually the most surprising thing that I learned is that the success of a theme park is actually the number of trash cans you have. It has nothing to do with like having the biggest, fastest roller coaster, it has nothing to do with the attractions and like speaking to the times of, I don't know, whatever is popular now. But if you like had one trash can in the entire theme park, that would like drastically reduce anyone's experience. But the more trash cans you have, the happier people are, apparently.
Awesome.
What's the equivalent of the trash can at a care provider?
That's a good question.
That's maybe the gist of today. Find your trash can and double down on it. Any thoughts, Kyle? What's the trash can at One Medical? It's hard.
I don't, that is a very difficult question. Yeah, it's like the opposite of clicks. It feels like the number of ways you can do, it's like options, but I don't know. Like, that's such a good metaphor. I'll have to think about it.
Let's circle back in 1 week and share notes.
It's maybe the title for our next webinar, Rick.
Find your trash can. Yeah. Okay. I see time's up. Thank you so much for sharing so much wisdom in only 60 minutes. We will make the recording available for everyone as of tomorrow. And yeah, looking forward to the next event.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.